Yes, it is.
Yeah, so happy Labor Day to you. So we're going to be talking a little politics. Everybody ready to talk politics? Yes, and the answer is yes. Resounding yes, absolutely. So, um, how has your Labor Day weekend been so far?
It's been great so far. Things are starting to pick up on the state and local politics arena. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the Secretary of State's race and here locally on the North Shore of the House District 90 special election to replace who is now Mayor Greg Cromer of Slidell, the St. Tammany GOP, which in all transparency, I'm a member of the St. Tammany GOP's executive board, met this past Tuesday and had an endorsement session. Ended up endorsing Congressman Steve Scalise in the federal congressional district race, but didn't give an endorsement for House District 90 and didn't give an endorsement for the Secretary of State's race. It's a very
Really?
high bar to reach in the St. Tammany GOP nowadays. You have to have a two-thirds majority vote of the members present. So it's difficult to get, but in a primary especially. But if you do earn it, that means that you're very, very well received by all parts of the Republican Party. And as you know, any political party has differences of opinion within it. It's very interesting. Who's probably the leading candidate, Ms. Mary Dubuisson, Mr. Cromer's former legislative aide, uh, just by name recognition only. She actually didn't come to the endorsement meeting and put out a press release because her campaign had gotten hold of a fundraising invitation that had 8 of our members' names on it as the host committee for probably the other most viable candidate in the race, Mr. John Raymond. And that's almost 50% of the board right there. So she just felt like it would be a waste of her time. And it's unfortunate that our board gave a perception that we would not be objective in the endorsement meeting. Unfortunately, that's the way Ms. Dubuisson perceived it. And she went ahead and did some events within her campaign that night, but we ended up not giving an endorsement in the race anyway, even though Mr. Raymond is the vice chairman of the St. Tammany GOP executive board.
So, just on that point, do you think that, say, an organization has an obligation to disclose if they have any kind of, say, political relationship like that?
Well, I think so. I've been on the board almost 7 years. I'm in the middle of my second term, elected to this GOP executive board, and I think that we have to disclose those kinds of things, and it wasn't publicly disclosed. The Dubuisson campaign happened to find out about it by accident, really, and unfortunately, most members of the board wait until after our endorsement meeting. And even though our bylaws don't require you to do that, it's always been an unstated, unwritten rule that we would hold off on making any public proclamations, either individually or as a group, until after the endorsement forums. Because we want the candidates to feel like everybody's getting a fair shot, and if there's a preconceived decision being made by a near majority of the board, it's going to be very difficult for a candidate to be able to compete if their opposition is getting that.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly sounds like that. So, do you think that have you seen any polls in terms of the Louisiana Secretary of State race?
No, I haven't seen any polling. Have you seen any polling recently?
No, have
I'm
not.
hearing a governor's poll was taken a few days ago out in the Lafayette area. I'm assuming that there will be a Secretary of State question in that polling. It was a live poll, so somebody put a lot of funding behind it for the governor's race. So yeah, we're waiting to see how that goes. We on the St. Tammany race, interesting. Mr. Raymond, the vice chairman of the St. Tammany GOP, he couldn't answer questions about his past, and there's public record out there that's under his sworn oath deposition from a lawsuit case that he admitted that he didn't file and pay his taxes at the state and federal level in the years they were due for about 5 years of his life. Now, factually, the story is he went back and did pay them eventually, but that's a tough thing for a Republican to run and win when they haven't spent a period of their years. I think it was around 5 years or so, based on the facts in the deposition that he gave under oath, that where he said he didn't do that, and that's a tough thing for any candidate, Republican or Democrat, to be able to convince folks that they're the right person to take care of their money and their tax dollars when they didn't even file and pay their taxes in the years they were due until they were caught in an audit.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what do you think is going to happen with that?
I think Miss Dubuisson, it's her race to lose, quite frankly.
Okay. Okay. So, any other races that you're familiar with that you like to speak about?
Yeah, in the governor's race, looks like I saw a news media hit late last night that said Senator Kennedy has told his media person that works on his campaigns to go ahead and get started, is the media report that I saw last night when it comes to the governor's race for next year. So the senator hasn't made any official announcements, of course, but as you know, it would be a very, very tough hill to climb for any other Republican to get in that race with the expectation of being able to defeat Senator Kennedy. He's wildly popular in the state, and his winning Senate race, his popularity was through the roof, and has been, his name recognition is in the 80s and 90s within the state. And from a Republican perspective, he's done a very, very good job. Even from a conservative perspective, in the Senate seat. So we'll see how that goes, but it'd be a tough race for John Bel Edwards if John Kennedy gets in that governor's race. And I think that we're in for a wild and woolly ride next year.
So, why would, I mean, I'm just saying aloud, why in the world would John Kennedy, unless he wants to be back home with his family, why would he leave the Senate perch where he gets national coverage around the clock to have to come back home and worry about matters such as, really parochial matters?
Well, Steve, the way I've seen it since I entered politics after I left the military and we settled permanently here in southern Louisiana, the governor's seat is really the most sought after seat if you are a politician in Louisiana, USA, no matter where you come from in the state. It's the governor's seat that's the most coveted amongst the politicians that have been in office and started that ladder climb very early in their careers. So I just see it as that's probably been his professional and personal in-state goal all along. And that he sees this opportunity in this midterm or the second term of John Bel Edwards as an opportunity to win. You can't keep doing this stuff forever, and everybody gets older every year. So, but he's done a fine job as our senator this year and last year, and he'll be missed if in fact he does run for the governorship.
Yeah, I'm sure CNN and everybody's going to miss him too. With his homey quips.
In modern day politics, I'd say he's probably one of the best at the one-liners, the homey one-liners. You think?
Yeah, I think he is. I think that something that he really didn't do too much of when he was state treasurer. At least I didn't hear that much. I mean, the media certainly didn't pick it up. If he did, I think that he probably read a book on on
Yeah.
sudden quotes to use when, say, being interviewed by CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News.
Yeah, and I think they'll continue to get that if he does become the governor of Louisiana, and it may be more get more of it because he won't be just speaking as one of 100. He'll be speaking as the governor of the state that has some of the largest oil and gas production in the country.
So why do you think that he would be actually the person to beat if he just actually does decide to jump in?
Yeah, yeah, I think he's the candidate to beat, and it'll be his race to lose, actually.
Really?
because Mr. Edwards just can't. He won't be able to withstand that. Lots of his votes are Kennedy voters, in my opinion. And I think the polling will bear that out when we start seeing polling on that. That's just my prediction on this.
Fair enough, but the polls, I mean, from what I saw, basically the lowest number that I've seen John Bell Edwards that I've seen at least was 49%, and the highest I've seen Senator Kennedy was 48%. So, I mean,
Well, I'd
yeah,
like to see head-to-head polling
yeah,
because when you
sure,
see Senator Kennedy in his own right being polled, he's in the upper 50s in job approval rating. He's in the high 80s, low 90s for name recognition, maybe even higher now, probably. So I'd like to see some head-to-head polling before I go that far.
sure,
I don't
sure.
think the numbers you're referencing really are going to be that accurate when you're just doing favorability on job approval on the governor and two senators, which is
Sure.
basically what.
No, I mean that's certainly fair enough, and
Yeah,
I'm assuming that if he does decide to jump in, that Congressman Abraham will bow out. I mean, there's been a lot of noise
yeah.
that he is certainly interested in the position.
Well, the perennial rumored candidates for this upcoming governor's race have been Ralph Abraham from up in the Monroe area, Jeff Landry, and John Kennedy have been the three that I've heard the most about, and possibly Mr. Scalise if the
Right.
Republicans don't win the House majority back. But I see that as an outlier. I think he's stated it publicly many times. Steve has that he's not going to run. So it would have to be a significant shift in the geography of the playing field, so to speak, from a political and a realistic perspective, whether he would actually do that this year or not. Although I do see a governorship in Mr. Scalise's future, I think most people, if he chooses to run at some point, he'll have a really, really good opportunity to take that seat too.
Well, I mean, he's young. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, relatively speaking, and so
Yeah.
yeah, never can tell, especially if say if John Bell Edwards were to win, and then
Mm-hmm.
of course he'd be term limited, and then that would
Yeah.
give Scalise an opportunity 4 years from now, as well as everybody else. But excuse me. And so uh, Landry, I mean, seems to me like he's been making a lot of noise. But do you think that Kennedy would be a much better candidate and would be much more favored to win than Landry?
Yeah, Kennedy has cross-party popularity across parties and the independents much more effectively than Attorney General Landry
Right.
does. My preference as a Republican and a citizen of the state is really to hope that Jeff will stay where he's at. We need that strong Attorney General in today's world, and I'd like to see him stay put for at least his term and then go on to other things later on after he's served as the Attorney General before. Not that I'm opposed to him being governor. I think he'd make a good, just as good a governor as anybody else, probably better. But I think he's very, very valuable to the state and the country, really, as an Attorney General right now.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and ask the questions of comment. Please go ahead and make your comment. I do see that Charles J. Forrester says Mass State Police. I think that, do you know what the reference is?
No, I do not.
Okay, okay. Again, and those people watching, please go share with your friends, your Facebook friends, your Twitter friends, your followers. This is also being played on YouTube. It's being played right now on, I think, about 8 or 9 different channels right now as we speak. So go ahead and share. And again, if you have any questions, ask the question, comment, make your comment. We'd love to hear from you. So, any other state news that you would like to address?
Well, I think the Secretary of State's race, I've had a chance to see uh, on the, had a chance to see most of the candidates the other night. We've got some very effective folks across the spectrum on the Republican side right now, and we are going to see a very exciting race. I think A.G. Crow, the former state senator from right here in this area, is going to be a very, very strong candidate. And Julie Stokes gives a very good presentation. She's got a lot of money, and she is going to be formidable in this race, I believe. The Rick Edmonds, state legislator out of East Baton Rouge, is very, very well presented, a very conservative voting record, as does Mr. Crow. So it's going to be an interesting race from a Republican perspective. I have not seen much out of the Democrat candidates yet, so I can't really make a judgment on that. But even with, just with Democrats in the race, I mean, they're going to take some portion of the vote and take away from the Republicans that are running in our jungle primary. So it's too early to tell yet what the vote split might be, but those three are probably the top candidates in the race from what I can see so far.
Okay, and on the Democratic side, the form of the debate that you saw, was it just Republicans?
Yeah, it was just the St. Tammany GOP's
Okay,
endorsement form.
gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Um, so, anything else statewide?
Uh, that's it from what I see so far. The biggest thing on the ballot that's non-candidate related is going to be the constitutional amendment to abolish the split jury system and go to a unanimous jury system for all felonies, which is the right thing to do. We support it here out of my former campaign team and my company. We are supporting that, as are many, many, and actually most Republicans and Democrats that I've seen, and the groups that generally have these discussions and debates in public, are supporting passing the unanimous jury's constitutional amendment. We look forward to doing away with the last bit of Jim Crow in the United States law.
Now, that was actually, I think, probably one of the only bills I've seen in eons that had bipartisan support.
Yeah, and personally, Steve, I think that will be the most in my lifetime anyway. I think that will be the most important vote that I cast in my lifetime.
Really?
To remove that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you see all of the fake outrage and people pulling statues down, those activities, it might make some folks feel good for a little bit,
Hmm.
but really it's hurting the country because those 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 items are no longer available to teach our kids what we don't want to have in the future. To make sure all folks remember those. But with this one, this will go down in history as the final vestiges of Jim Crow law being removed, which should never have been put in place in the United States of America in the first place. And it actually does something. It will have a positive impact on criminal justice reform, which we all know on both sides of the aisle in the state is a tremendous, tremendous policy challenge for both sides, and a tremendous policy challenge for the African American community in the state of Louisiana. So this is a really big deal, and encourage everybody to get out and vote yes for that constitutional amendment.
So, how do you think Election Day is at this point in time? How do you think that's going, say, nationally?
But as far as the midterms go,
Yep.
I think the president's candidates have done quite well.
Hmm.
Again, he's gone beyond the naysayers and the propaganda media on the left, which is the majority of our media in this country, unfortunately. And he's even gone beyond the estimates of his own consultants and the establishment Republican folks. So they're we that voted for the man are pleased to see those types of candidates get elected, and we're excited about the midterms. And as a veteran, I'm very excited. We have many, many veterans that have won primaries, and on the Republican side anyway, and that are going to be very, very viable challengers. John James, a Army combat helicopter pilot up in Michigan, running for the U.S. Senate. Wayne Lebanowski, Navy veteran down in Florida, 09, running, going to be running against a socialist type candidate named Soto. Martha McSally out in Arizona 1, Air Force combat veteran, fighter pilot, wing commander, and Air Force veteran Wendy Rogers in the Arizona 1st District, all won their primaries over the weekend, and except for James, he previously won his. So from a veteran's perspective, we're very pleased to see that happening.
Sure. Yeah, the president certainly has had a good run in terms of his candidates. Although he had a little problem earlier this year, at least in terms of the Alabama election. I think maybe one or two others, but I think he's pretty much batting over 90%.
Yeah, I think he's found the ground that he needs to battle on from a internal party battle in the primaries. Now it took him a while to get there. Alabama, I think there were some missteps in that one that could have made that turn out much better. But for the most part, I'd say he's doing very, very well. And it all depends on people getting out to vote in November. And I think you're going to see a good turnout. And in Florida's elections over the weekend, we noted there were more Republicans that turned out in the primary than Democrats. And we've seen that all across the country for the most part.
Now that's a pretty the Florida governor. I mean, the Florida's governor's race. I mean, that's a very strange race.
Why's that?
Why? Well, I mean, just the fact that you have the first African American running for Florida governor, and he is. I think he's certainly on the progressive wing of the.
Yeah. I would say that. Yeah, that's the interesting thing is that you have a candidate, Ron DeSantis, who's a congressman right now, that's on the conservative wing of the Republican Party, and has been a very strong Donald Trump supporter. I watched the Democrat candidate in an interview the day after the election. He's very good. He's got a very good message. Unfortunately, his message is not. It's wrapped around a socialist set of policies. He believes that things like he tweeted out, "Healthcare is a right" yesterday. Well, healthcare is not a right because healthcare is a service provided by paid people, and you cannot use government to force someone to provide their expertise. It's not allowed in the United States of America. Now, if you want to have that kind of thing, you can go to other countries, but in the U.S. Constitution and the foundation of the United States of America, that does not exist as a right. Now, is it important? Absolutely, it's important. Should everybody have access to minimum health care? Absolutely. Should we help the poor? Absolutely. But those are the kinds of differences that average Americans that believe in the United States of America as a country and the Constitution just have a basic philosophical, not even philosophical, but a fundamental legal difference in that type of approach to policy. But Mr. DeSantis better not take it for granted. Like I said, that man is very, very good. He stays on topic. He stays on message, and his message it sounds very everyday American until you start peeling the policies back.
So didn't the president, when he was a candidate, I mean, he basically said that healthcare was a right, didn't he? I mean, he didn't say healthcare is a right, but he basically said that that he doesn't want anybody dying in the street. I think is the term that he used, and
There's a large difference. There's a big leap between that and saying something's a right where you can force somebody to provide the service that they make their living on to give you something for free. Big difference. That didn't work in the Soviet Union. That's what they used to do. That's why we now have many, many medical doctors that sell fruit and vegetables and roadside stands in what's now Russia today, especially right after the Soviet Union disappeared. People that would have been high-paid individuals and professionals in our country were down to their poorest level, and were before that anyway. But they completely lost their jobs because the government couldn't afford to pay them and couldn't afford to keep them on the staff, so they got fired. That's what happens in those types of governments and those types of societies. All you have to do is point to Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves in the world. Should be the wealthiest country in the world, and you have people fighting over scraps of trash and food that's been thrown out and spoiled, and it's just sad. So
sure, no, look,
we've got to fight for the right type of government in our country, and the right type of government is the government the founders gave us, a constitutional republic.
I mean, I certainly agree. I mean, I certainly I'm opposed to socialism, opposed to communism, but I don't understand what the candidate Trump meant when he was talking about nobody should die in the street. I mean, does that, if you're not going to either, I mean, he didn't define it, so is that fair enough for him to just say, well, this is what I believe, but it goes undefined?
I don't think it's undefined. If someone's brought to an emergency room today that's dying, that's homeless on the street, they get care.
So
It's been that way forever and ever and ever. I'm sorry that the talking points on one side of the aisle in this country say otherwise, but it's still that way. It was that way when I was born, and it will continue to be that way regardless of whether universal health care, God forbid, is ever passed in this country.
yeah, but the thing is that you also have preventive care, and which obviously, without doubt, in my opinion at least, that if you are able to get the benefits of preventive care, then you don't need to be in the hospital, or
Sure.
the chances are
That's why we have
reduced.
Medicaid.
I'm sorry.
That's why we have Medicaid.
Yeah, but not everybody will qualify for Medicaid, and in some states you don't have Medicaid, at least the Obamacare Medicaid.
There is enough of a safety net in this country to take care of those folks. I will go to my grave standing beside what I said. You cannot make something that is someone's livelihood a right for somebody else to take it away from them free through the use of government force. That is not American. That is socialism at its core, and that is a road to ruin for any nation, especially a nation like ours.
Well, I got to tell you, I wish that statement would be applied across the board. I think I mentioned to you once before, back in 1980 or so, when I was in law school actually, and when I was becoming an attorney, the state of Louisiana, through the auspices of lobby and Governor Edwards, completely revamped the workers' compensation law, basically taking attorneys out of the process, and saying, I mean, making it almost impossible for attorneys to make any money and on those type of cases. So what you had was unprepared, injured people who had to fend for themselves, or or hire, say, attorneys who were just out of law school. So, in a sense, in a great sense, in my opinion, I think what the government did was take or force people to work for a particular controlled amount. You can only make X amount of money per case. I mean, isn't that the same?
Yeah, I'm not saying that I agree with that policy. That is the same. I think, and it's my view, that the least government is the best government, and the least that the government interferes with free markets, the better. Some regulation may be required to protect the little guy, but it's got to be solid regulation. It's got to be good, and it's got to be minimal, and it's got to be effective. And if you have outcomes like what you just described, that's not effective regulation.
No, in my opinion, I don't think it was because, look, again, there were a lot of people, quite frankly, who were legitimately injured. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't people who are not gaming the system. Yes, that's going to happen in any place, about anything, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
And
you
Steve,
know,
that's why it's so important to put people in office, and for people that are willing to push against the status quo to become government employees if they want to serve at the state, federal, or local level. But they've got to be people, the types of people that will push against bureaucracy and try to break it up, because the bureaucracy, left alone, tends to go with the status quo and keep bad policy like what you're describing. We need people that are willing to go up there, stay for a period of time, and then go back to private life. But during that period of time, they're in government to push against the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is unelected. It has it has its own life at times, and the Veterans Administration at the federal level is the worst of the federal bureaucracies when it comes to things like that. A good example of a pretty darn good bureaucracy, because it's had leaders that have pushed back against the status quo at all levels, is the Department of Veteran Affairs in Louisiana. That has got a very innovative group of leaders in the department that have been both appointed and are full-time civil servants. And every time I talk to those leaders, I really come away with a smile because they talk about their policies and their programs that they've created and things that they've let go by the wayside, because you won't find very many veterans at all that will talk negatively about the state of Louisiana's Department of Veterans Affairs. I mean, they've done some great things and continue to do those kind of things, and I think they're a good model to look at. Another one's the Agriculture Commission. Mike Strain's done a great job both cutting the budget, but at the same time maintaining a high quality of service. And when I talk to farmers and folks that deal with the Agriculture Commission a lot, by and large, it's mostly positive type things. So there are groups that can do that and do that, and it all depends on the leaders that we get appointed and get elected.
yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I certainly like Mike Strain. I mean, seems like a very, very decent guy. So why don't you pick? We have about 10 minutes, so why don't you pick a federal issue of your choice?
You always throw that softball to me, but it's like made out of mercury these days, Steve. It slips through your fingers because there's so many issues that
I know.
to talk about. But let's talk about Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie and his testimony this week. We've seen more and more as the closed door testimony is beginning to come out. The latest I saw was from Kim Strassel in the Wall Street Journal. Really did a nice roll up, and it's an opinion piece. So
Hmm.
I got to be upfront about that, but it's a nice roll up of everything that she's heard from sources from the testimony that's come out, that Mr. Orr contradicted what Mr. Comey, the former FBI director that was fired, what Mr. Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion GPS, which did the Steele dossier, and Peter Strzok, the former counterintelligence deputy director at the FBI that was fired, and Lisa Page, the former FBI counsel attorney that was also fired. And
Hmm.
he has contradicted that he told the FBI that before they ever got a FISA warrant, that that the Steele dossier was not verified, that Mr. Steele was extremely biased, which we know that is a fact. We've got his statements on that, and that he was not a credible source. And unfortunately, though, the FBI went for the FISA warrant 4 different times, kept going back to Mr. Orr even after they fired Steele for violating their rules of confidential informants, as what's called a cutout, to continue to get information from him, even though he continued to tell them that this was not a credible source. So I think that really, it's not a stake in the heart of the Trump collusion thing, but it really does highlight what appears to be the makings of a conspiracy at the very head of the DOJ and the FBI, of names like Sally Yates, who was fired, Andrew McCabe, who was fired, Lisa Page Peterstruck, James Comey, and we really need to have something independent set up to investigate this, because this makes the Trump collusion story look like kindergarten.
I don't know. I mean, so he has an opinion that Steele was not credible and that he's biased. So what?
No. This is Bruce Orr, the
Yeah.
#4 official at
No,
the
I
department,
I understand.
who is interviewed by the FBI 12 times.
Yeah.
12 times as a source, okay? And 12 times before they even went for the first FISA warrant, he told them what Steele had said, that he was desperate to stop Donald Trump from getting elected, and then afterwards desperate to stop his presidency. And when you combine that with the fact that he was working with Russian sources that are still unverified and uncorroborated to write the dossier, that Fusion GPS was being paid by the Coy, I forget the second name of the law firm, which was hired by DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. You start combining that all together. You talk about, Hillary Clinton used to talk about the vast right-wing conspiracy. This certainly has the makings of, and the factual basis behind it, much more than the Trump collusion thing. I mean, the only thing a factual basis that you have is an email that said that this information was coming from the government, but the information that happened in the Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. and Kushner and Manafort was all about the Magnitsky Act and adoptions and those kind of things. It had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, that's a very weak argument to start a massive investigation that we've now spent about $6 million on, and it's still not over. And then we have all of these facts coming out. Now, do I take pleasure in saying that? No, absolutely not. I'm as concerned about the Russians or the Chinese or anybody else hacking into our systems, especially our election systems, as every other American, probably more so because I know how it works from my professional background. But to see the potential of an overthrow of a duly elected president under our U.S. Constitution, and the politicians behind it continuing out in the public talking about resistance and putting money behind that resistance movement and those kinds of things is very, very dangerous. Our country's in grave danger as these facts continue to come out. I get more and more concerned, and based on the Bruce Orr testimony that we're hearing today, I am very concerned that our country is in grave danger, and there needs to be a separate grand jury criminal investigation started right away in order to get control of this and figure out exactly who was doing what and when. And there's a record, and the President of the United States could declassify every communication between that group of people, the CIA director and the President and his national security staff and the UN ambassador, who unmasked hundreds of Americans in surveillance, in U.S. surveillance on them, which is very unusual. All of those communications need to be released, and the only thing that should be masked really is methods and sources. And that's very easy to do, and the president could do it today, and he should.
Okay, I mean,
And I say that as a warrior for the
mhm.
United States of America for 32 years of my life. We are in grave danger if this is allowed to continue and not be addressed.
So you don't think we're in grave danger with a president of the United States saying that the media is the enemy of the people, and we have
Absolutely
some
not. The
goon
media made the
from
media
from
has made
California?
the Steve, the media has created the impression that they're the enemy of the average everyday American person. That they're on the side of the political elites, on one side of the political debate in this country. Most of them are, and even the ones that say they're not, quite often end up on that same side.
You don't have,
So no, the
yeah,
media created
mhm.
Donald Trump. The left
Yeah. Well,
created Donald Trump.
okay.
I'm not afraid of Donald Trump. What one thing in one concrete piece of policy or directive has the man or his administration given that has hurt someone or hurt the United States of America yet? What what's the one thing? Anything.
Well, look, I could go on for quite a long period of time. I mean, again, I'm not, as I've mentioned to
Yeah,
you.
let's get
Wait,
specific,
hold on.
brother.
Well,
Let's get
we don't have,
specific.
we
Come
don't.
on, Steve. You got to give me one piece of policy. We got a minute left. Give me
Okay.
one, and I'll come back to you next week, and we'll talk about it.
Well, we don't have a whole bunch of time, but let me just say this because I just wanted to be clear, and I've said it to you before. I've said it publicly many times. Is that my issue with Donald Trump is less about policy than it is about person.
Well, you
It's
can't say the country's in grave danger when you have political operatives and intelligence operatives that are working to undermine a presidential candidate and using falsehoods to get a FISA court to issue warrants, even though they've been warned by one of their own at the top, and say this country's not in grave danger. And you can't say the country's in grave danger just because you don't like the man. Hell, I don't like the man. I think he's a jerk most
no.
of the time.
What I'm saying.
But
No.
he's
What I'm
not put this country in danger. He's put this country on the right darn footing, and the American people see it, and most of them
the
don't
American
believe what
people
the
don't
propaganda says.
look. The American people, meaning like 30% of the people. Okay, maybe 30.
66
No,
million.
maybe 35.
66 million
Maybe
of us.
35% of the people, okay, agree, but the vast majority of the people say that they believe that the Mueller investigation should proceed, that they think that Donald Trump is lying, that they think in the plurality say that they believe that Donald Trump has something to do with potential collusion. So, I mean,
There's no evidence of that.
well,
There
no,
hasn't been any.
you don't
Not
know.
even the Don Trump Jr. Tower meeting. You know, Lanny Davis, Steve, Lanny Davis tried to be a source for CNN. That CNN did the same thing the FBI did. They took a media hit that they created, used an anonymous source, and then used that as a source for their follow-on reporting on Michael Cohen saying that he had knowledge that Donald Trump knew about the meeting beforehand and all that. Not that it matters because it's not illegal. It's part of a campaign and it's perfectly legal for them to do that. But even that didn't work out for them because now CNN is being pummeled every minute of every day because they've lied and they
Wait,
continue
wait,
to
how did they lie?
bring it
Wait.
ABC, CBS,
How
even
did?
NBC has dropped the story and said, we apologize. This was wrong. The source was not giving us the actual facts, and it's incorrect that
How did
when
they
we
lie?
Donald Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting beforehand, and CNN won't drop the story. They've been being asked to do it by their peers and the citizens every single day. And what's wrong? Because they don't have journalistic integrity anymore. Most media outlets that are in the big bucks arena in this country have no journalistic integrity anymore. It's very rare. And CNN is standing by a story that's an outright lie. Michael Cohen swore under oath to Congress that Donald Trump didn't know about that meeting and he had no knowledge on whether Donald Trump knew about that meeting beforehand. And then he didn't know about that meeting beforehand. And for Lanny Davis to be an anonymous source for CNN and for CNN to continue with the story that they published on July 27th is makes them the enemy of the American people because the American people are sovereign in this country. And if
Rob,
they
Rob,
want to
Rob,
be
wait, Rob,
our
Rob, Rob,
enemy, they want to be our
do you hear
enemy.
what you're saying? I mean, do
We
you
will
hear what
take
you're
them
saying?
down. We will take them down. I worked every single
You're,
day
you're
to
going to get your guns to
front
take them
the
down? I
enemy,
mean, what
take them down because
enemy
they
of the
are the
people?
enemy of the American people. They have made themselves our enemy because they are lying and they are making this man, who I don't even like. I don't even like the guy. The man attacked me publicly twice. Okay, I can't stand him for that matter. But these people in this media organization continue to be the propaganda arm of the left wing in this nation that is heading down a socialist path, and they know it, and we know it, and we will take them down. Eventually, they will lose their ability to report and their audience.
Who knows, one of those weirdos who get influenced by statements that you're making and the president making about being enemy of the people may take them down some other way. Okay, I mean, this is profound.
What you mean the jihadis out in New Mexico in the camp that a liberal judge just set 3 of them free over a technicality?
No,
When they
no,
ought to
no,
be
no,
in
no,
Guantanamo Bay, they were teaching kids how to attack a hospital and school.
no.
Oh my goodness, that's the kind of thing that we have to fight against, Steve. And you need to join us and join me in calling this out when they have a media outlet that is the enemy of the American people.
Wait. Something that I know
How
nothing.
many times has that story been reported on CNN or MSNBC in the last week? The judge just did it 2 days ago. There's 3 jihadis on the street that are responsible for a dead child buried in a camp in New Mexico, and part of a team that was planning. We got the report in writing of their operational plans to attack a hospital in Atlanta and to teach kids to be school shooters across the nation. And you're telling me that we need to be worried about a meeting with a Russian that talked about adoptions and getting the Magnitsky Act released? Come on, man. If you can't do that when you're running a presidential campaign, and you can't do like Mike Flynn and meet with the president as you're the national security advisor designee without getting thrown in jail in this country,
Well,
we've got
what happened.
a long way down the wrong damn path. And it's time for the American people to rise up and demand that these media outlets do the right thing. And CNN needs to drop that story and apologize to the American people. Trump didn't know about the meeting because Cohen doesn't have the credibility, and Lanny Davis lied when he was their anonymous source, and they need to
Okay, so let me make sure that I understand.
Because they are making themselves.
Okay, wait, hold on. Number one, you said that CNN lied.
Yeah.
Okay,
they're lying today. They're standing by the story when they know their source has admitted that he was lying.
They're lying. Wait. They're standing.
And they're not properly reporting on a massive story important to the security of our schools, the security of our hospitals, from the enemy that's declared war on the American people. Look, I was in the Pentagon on 9/11. I'm tired of this crap. I fought the war. I helped plan the war. We've done the politically correct wrong thing so many times in this fight. That it's getting to the point where now I'm worried about the kids in school right here in Southeast Louisiana and in hospitals and things. When the media won't report on a story like that because they're afraid they're going to get attacked for being racist, and I'll be damned if I'll let somebody call me a racist because I'm opposed to fundamental Islam. It's a blight on society and civilization, and it needs to be dealt with. But
Okay, so
not report on that story and to continue to say that they're going to keep their story about Donald Trump knowing about this meeting because their source says so, even though that source has admitted he lied publicly several times, and all the other places, media outlets have dropped it, even the most left wing of them. CNN's wrong. They're making themselves the enemy of the American people. Okay. That's what's happened. All Donald Trump has said is reflecting what the people of the United States think. And we're a majority, regardless of what your numbers say. I disagree with your numbers. We are 66 million people, and we are growing, and the elections that we're seeing so far prove it. And I can't wait for November's election day when the blue wave turns into a blue dribble.
Okay, well, I personally don't care who wins, quite frankly. I mean, in terms of Republican, Democrat, what I'd like to do is I'd
Oh,
like
yes, you do.
no no no
Come on.
no 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 wait excuse, no no no
Yes, you do.
no
Yes, you do.
what
Because you don't like the policies of Donald Trump. Come on, Steve.
I don't like the person of Donald Trump. I mean, you find one person like myself who said that Donald Trump had, that I believe that Donald Trump should pick whomever he wants and that the Democrats should get out of the way and let him pick the government that he wants unless there is an issue of ethics. That's been my position. You certainly have never said anything like that regarding any Democrat, have you? I
What's
mean,
that?
and so therefore, what I'm saying is that if a person becomes president, that they have a right, not an absolute right, but they have a right to form their government the way that they want, and that means changing of policies. Okay, what I'm
And
saying,
getting their nominees appointed in a timely manner.
yeah, I agree, unless there's an ethical consideration, and that has been my point. Okay, so for me now, in terms of Trump, look, I'm sorry, I think the man is dangerous. I really do. I think the majority.
But
Wait, please,
go
because
ahead.
you
Go ahead.
always cut me off, and that's not right. I think the man is dangerous for what he says, without any type of facts that he is presenting, and so time after time after time, making just irrational statements that don't have facts is beyond comprehension. And even if you take away the whole conspiracy issue, okay, in terms of collusion, you have so many other issues that impute his credibility in terms of corruption. That
You know,
yeah,
uh, I, I don't disagree with you, but when I look back at this and I see things like him saying, "Hey, my campaign's been spied on," and he gets slammed by people on the left, especially, "Oh, you don't have any facts to back that up," blah blah blah.
no,
Well, now we know.
no,
Now
what
we know his he may just be ahead. I don't
he
know,
said tapped.
but I can tell you he's got more information than you and I will ever have while he's in office. So he knows things, and it's his prerogative whether he releases it or not. So I'll be honest with you. You give me a list of the things that he's said and tweeted out that are dangerous, and well, let's talk about them point by point by point. And I'll tell you where I agree, but I think I'll tell you most of the time that I disagree and why. Because I hear you, brother. You come on and you say this, and I know where you're coming from as far as personal goes, but I think the greater danger to the United States is that the media has reported over 90% of the time in a negative way on this president of the United States, and he's doing amazing things for this country. Amazing things for this
Well,
country.
he's
Watch Canada come to the table and do an agreement today when he got slammed for for challenging these countries that have been basically stealing from the American people due to global economies and trade deals and those kind of things for years. And I watched Canada come to the table today. It started yesterday morning. Oh yeah, we'll get an agreement with Canada. Even the Mexican trade representative stayed in Washington D.C. So they could be there to sign on to the agreement if Canada does it. You watch them do it. And it's going to happen today. And another prediction from the left-wing media, hand-wringing and naysaying and attacking this president, will be shot down.
okay. Well, that's fair
So
enough. I mean, let's.
give them to us, give them to me point by point instead of just talking in generalities, and let's get specific. Next show, let's get specific and devote it to what Donald Trump has said, and we can talk about it and debate it and get it all aired out, because I'm all for it. I don't like I said, I don't like the guy either. Half the time when I see his tweets, I cringe. But then again, I've also learned, like, and the spying on my campaign thing was one of them. I was skeptical about that. But I'm no longer skeptical about that. And our country's in grave danger because there's no journalistic, intellectual curiosity to look into those kind of things as much as we're looking into the Trump collusion thing.
Okay.
And look, I'm one of the Americans that says let the Mueller investigation continue because of what Russia supposedly did. I don't have access to the classified behind the intelligence assessment that came out in January 2017. So we have to wait to see, and that's the only way I'm going to get to see it unless I go back into government service. So I want that to continue too. But that doesn't mean that I think it's right or that it's healthy for this nation to have its president that's doing great things for the country to be attacked by all of the intellectual elites, the media elites, the academic elites, and the political establishment on both sides of the aisle, the GOP too. It's not healthy for the country. And quite frankly, those of us out here that are just citizens that want a good place, a good country for our grandchildren to grow up in, are very, very frustrated and concerned. So let's do them. We'll point by point next week.
I'll make a list. I'll make a list. What I was referring to, by the way, was and I didn't get a chance to mention it, but what I was referring to, by the way, was that California guy who made threats to the Boston Globe. I think 9 threats to the Boston Globe. He was charged yesterday. And basically, every time he made a threat, he called the Boston Globe enemy of the people. So those kind of comments and those kind of threats don't come out of whole cloth. I mean, when you make statements like that, when the president makes statements like that, okay, words matter. Enemy of the people, words matter. I'm not going to call.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to call.
Words matter, and I'm a citizen of the United States, and I can call the media and the press a failure in its duties to the American people, and that a lot of them are my enemy because they have made themselves that way. I can say that all I want to, and I'm right to say it. And this individual that was making violent threats has been rolled up by the law enforcement folks, and he ought to be tried, and if he's guilty, convicted, and sent to jail. So you don't do that in this country. And we all know that, but you know what else we don't do in this country? We used to not have our internal politics go beyond our shores, and now you can't even have a decent foreign policy like this president has without being attacked by the left and people going overseas and attacking him, both on the left and the right. I'm tired of that too, and I'd like to see both political parties stop that because it's not healthy for the world or our nation. And its role in the world. It's not healthy for them to be attacking the president when he's trying to negotiate with these dictators or talk to them and at least get them to a table so we're not shooting nuclear weapons at each other. It's not healthy. And they're the responsible parties. They have the money, they have the communications infrastructure, and they're the ones putting that message out day in and day out. Day in and day out. It's not a surprise that some people are affected by that. But at least I hope they're accurately reporting it this time, as opposed to the Annapolis newspaper that got attacked by some guy that hated him anyway, and the news media making up that it was because of Donald Trump. That's an issue.
Well, I think this is real clear, and so anyway, we'll have to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. We'll do that next week. I'll send you the list so I don't surprise you. Okay, and I think that's the only fair thing to do.
Absolutely.
So, those people watching, please share. Have a wonderful Labor Day, and we're going to say goodbye. You're gonna shut yours down too?
Yeah, Steve. Thank you very much, and have a great Labor Day. I look forward to next week. And it'll be fun, and it'll be educational and informative, I'm sure, because people will be surprised, have some surprises, like you and I always have. We're always surprised at some things that we disagree on, and a lot of things that we actually agree on. So,
okay,
have a great week.
That's fair enough.